And on to question 11. So this question is all about networking. Explain two differences between a LAN and a WAN. LAN, local area network, WAN, wide area network. There are 4 marks here, so for each one you need to say 2 things. So you need to say something about a LAN and WAN in difference 1, something about a LAN and WAN in difference 2. So the obvious one to start with is why are they called local and wide? So you could start by saying a local area network is on one site. Obviously you'd be writing this in full sentences. And a wide area network is global or over a wide area. There you go, one thing for each that compares the two, so now you can have 2 marks for that. Let's move on. Another difference between them. Well, we could talk about who controls them. So a local area network, a LAN, is controlled by the people who own it. So controlled by the users. So our LAN at school, our local area network that we use, our school network, we have absolute control over it. The wide area network, the WAN, is controlled by many different people. So controlled by many different people. So for example, you've got the ISP, the internet service provider, you've got the telecoms company like BT who connect the actual wires together, and also the people who are at the other end who own the web services. So one very clear difference between a WAN and a LAN is the fact of who controls it. A LAN is controlled by us, a WAN is controlled by many people. 2 easy differences to explain. You could also talk about the different protocols that are used. A LAN uses Ethernet, WAN uses things TCP/IP. So you could say that, different kinds of protocols, but I'll do for now. HTTP and HTTPS are 2 application layer protocols. Why is HTTPS used rather than HTTP? Well, clearly the difference is the S. The S stands for secure, and you can have a mark simply by saying it is more secure. If you want to make sure of the mark, you can say it uses encryption. So HTTP is the protocol that connects web services together. Your web page uses HTTP to get to you. HTTPS encrypts the information before it arrives, which means it can't be read as it goes along, because the internet is a public network and anyone can read the data. So secure, use of encryption. That's the difference with HTTPS. The application layer and the network layer are 2 of the layers within the TCP/IP stack. What are the names of the other 2 TCP/IP stack layers? Right, so we need to remember there are 4 layers in the stack. So at the top you've got the application layer. Next down you have the transport layer. Then you have the network layer. And below that you have the data link layer. So clearly we've dealt with that, we've dealt with that. So the 2 layers that we're not talking about here are the transport and the data link layer. 2 marks just by remembering something. Then now we're going to move on to an explanation question. What is the purpose of the network layer within the TCP/IP stack? Now the network layer is where something like IP works, the Internet Protocol. And remember, the Internet Protocol gives every resource on the Internet an address, which means that you can know where anything goes to. So if you talk about something like packaging data and giving the address for the target computer, you can have 2 marks. So IP packages up your data and gives each packet an address so that it knows which computer to go to. There you go, that's 2 marks. Now, explain how MAC address filtering works. So we need to know, first of all, what do we mean by a MAC address? Well, so MAC stands for Media Access Control. You can't have a mark for that. But if you explain what a MAC address is, then you can have a mark. So we can say about that that's an address given to every physical component. So every item in a network has an address that's built into it, into the chips that make it up. So doesn't matter all this business about IP addresses and so on, that matters nothing. The actual physical component itself has its own address. So that's your first thing. Describe what a MAC address is, and then what do we mean by filtering? Well, this is where we're talking about network security. How do we make sure that only the devices we want to connect to our network connect to it? Well, MAC address filtering means that every time something connects to the network, the MAC address is checked against an allowed list, and only the permitted ones can connect. So it's a bit like acting as a doorman at a party. Each item that comes to the network has its own address. We check them against a list of addresses that are allowed in, and as long as it's on that list, it can connect. Otherwise, it's not allowed.